It was just past 3:30 in the morning when we got the order to stand by. The air was cool, almost peaceful. You could hear the horses snorting, the clatter of canteens, and someone coughing down the line. Then, like God slamming a door, the artillery opened up. That was the beginning of Operation Barbarossa. The day we crossed into Soviet land. They said the Russians would break like glass. They said we'd be in Moscow by August. My name is Hans Becker. I was born in 1919 in a little village near Regensburg. We didn't have much. My father lost his leg in the Great War. He used to sit under the walnut tree, smoking, staring into the hills like they owed him something. My mother worked herself to the bone. We had pigs, a few chickens, and a radio that only picked up static unless you held the antenna just right. I remember how cold the winters were, how bread was more crust than loaf, and how the men in town walked hunched, as if still carrying the weight of Versailles. When the National Socialists came to power, everything changed. Suddenly the streets were clean. The men stood taller. There were jobs, marches, songs. I didn't understand politics, but I understood pride. So when they asked for volunteers, I raised my hand. Not because I hated anyone, but because I wanted to believe in something. I joined the Wehrmacht in '38. At first, I fixed trucks. I liked the feel of oil on my hands, but war doesn't care what you like. By '39, I had a rifle instead of a wrench. Poland was fast, brutal. We rolled through like thunder, and when it stopped, we never looked back. France came after. I saw Paris from the back of a truck. The Eiffel Tower looked smaller than I expected. But the war didn't feel real then. It was still clean, still far away from the bone. Then came the whispers. Russia, a campaign unlike the others. Officers said it would be a final blow. We'd knock them down in one strike. But the older sergeants, they didn't smile. We loaded trains in the spring of '41. Endless trains. Men, horses, tanks, fuel. I wrote to my mother, said I was going to help liberate the East. I didn't know what that meant. On the morning of June 22nd, we crossed the Bug River. The sky was pink with sunrise, and already the air stank of diesel and fire. Trees cracked under tank treads. Birds scattered like shrapnel. The Russians weren't ready, but they didn't run. They fought. Hard. That day, the earth swallowed men whole, and I began to understand. This wasn't France. This wasn't a parade. This was something else entirely. We pushed on, deeper into Belarus. The roads turned to dust, the rivers to mud. Every mile we advanced felt like pulling teeth from the earth. Sometimes we marched 20 kilometers a day. When the trucks broke down, we carried the ammunition ourselves, sweat-soaked, blistered, and hungry. The heat was unbearable. Flies stuck to your face no matter how often you swatted. Men joked about it at first. Then they stopped joking. We passed through villages where the air smelled of smoke and milk gone sour. The locals just stared. No cheering crowds like in France. Just silence and eyes full of something I couldn't read. It happened in a patch of pine woods. We were resting, helmets off, boots loosened. Then all at once, shots. From the trees, from the ground, from nowhere. A boy named Dietrich took a bullet through the cheek. He didn't scream. He just dropped like his strings had been cut. We fired blindly, into the trees, into the dark. And when it was over, we found nothing. Just empty cartridges, blood trails, and branches snapping in the wind. They called them partisans, ghosts with rifles. That night, we sat in a clearing, backs against trees, rifles across our laps. Weber, the youngest of us, asked if we'd be home by Christmas. No one answered. Kohler said he missed his wife's stew, that she used too much garlic, but he'd give anything for one more spoon. Me? I missed the sound of rain on the tin roof of our barn. and the way the cows would low when they knew my father was coming with feed. We didn't talk about what happened in the woods, just stared into the fire like it might answer us. 2 days later, they brought in prisoners, Soviets, dirty, starving, barely more than boys. One of them couldn't have been older than 16. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't hold his bread. I gave him mine. I don't know why. Maybe to feel like a person again. An officer saw me, said I was soft, that these men were beasts, not soldiers. I wanted to ask him if beasts cried like that boy did. But I just saluted and walked away. By July, we reached Minsk, or what was left of it. The Soviets had fought hard, then torched their own supply lines as they pulled back. We went street by street. Apartment buildings became fortresses. Basements hid snipers. Every window was a rifle barrel. I lost 2 more men that day. Kohler caught shrapnel in the thigh, screamed until they hit him with morphine. Weber stepped on a mine. There was nothing left to carry back. We took the city, but it didn't feel like a victory, just one more smoking ruin to pass through. Dear Mother, I hope you are safe. I hope the crops are good this year. We have moved far, deeper into the east than I ever imagined. The fields stretch forever, but so do the graves. I am healthy. Please tell Father that his watch still works. I wear it every day. With love, Hans. I didn't tell her about the burned villages, about the frozen eyes of men I had shot, about the part where I wake at night thinking I hear Weber calling for his mother. They told us the Russians would fold like cards, but they didn't. They kept retreating, then fighting, then retreating again. Their soldiers didn't look like ours. They were underfed, dressed in rags, but they had something we didn't. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was the knowledge that they had nowhere to run. One officer said, "The Soviet will is like ice, cold but unbreakable." I didn't know what he meant until I saw a man fight with both legs shattered. I started to wonder if we were the invaders, or just the next army swallowed by this land. July 10th, 1941. We were just west of Smolensk. The air smelled of wet hay and cordite. We'd been on the road for weeks, sleeping in ditches, eating whatever was hot and didn't wriggle. Command said the Soviets were nearly finished. But if that were true, why did we keep fighting for every patch of forest? The 29th Motorized was ordered to advance toward the Dnieper. My unit, 10th Infantry, followed close behind. We weren't mechanized. We were the boots, the shovels, the blood that filled the gaps. July 16th. We entered the outer ring of Smolensk under artillery fire. Soviet shells landed short, long, never in the same place twice. The earth was broken. Trees snapped like matchsticks. A young lieutenant named Fisher lost both legs when he stepped on a mine. He stayed conscious long enough to beg us not to leave him. We fought for 3 straight weeks, house to house, street to street. The Soviets didn't retreat. They bled for every corner. I shot a man trying to climb out of a cellar. He looked like a teacher, not a soldier. No helmet, just a pistol, and a picture of his wife in his shirt pocket. By early September, the winds had changed. Literally. The nights grew colder. We woke with frost on our blankets. Someone joked it was just Russia reminding us whose land we were in. Our boots were falling apart. Socks worn to thread. Rations were stale, and the cigarettes ran out weeks ago. I caught a fever near Dorogobuj, shivered through 2 nights with nothing but a canvas over me. Weber would have made some joke about my weak stomach. But Weber was gone. September 15th. Word spread that Kiev had fallen. They called it a great victory. Over 600,000 prisoners, they said. But none of us cheered. What good was victory if it left us starving in the cold, burying friends in shallow graves? Dietrich started drinking from a bottle he found in an abandoned village. Vodka, maybe, or paint thinner. He said, "Hans, if we're not the good guys, What are we? I didn't answer. I didn't know anymore. October 2nd, Operation Typhoon, the final push for Moscow. They told us this would end it, that we'd be in Red Square before winter. But the Russians didn't break. They dug in, and then they came back. Near Vyazma, they encircled whole divisions. Our radio lines failed. Supply trucks vanished into snow and mud. For the first time, we weren't advancing. We were surviving. October 14th, we entered a village south of Mozhaisk. The houses were burned. The people, if they remained, were hollow-eyed and silent. We found an old woman and a girl hiding in a barn. Kohler pointed his rifle at them. The girl clutched a potato like it was gold. I stepped between them, told Kohler they were nothing, no threat. He lowered the rifle, muttering about orders. That night the girl brought us a loaf of black bread. She left it near our fire without a word. I've never tasted anything so bitter. October 29th. Dear Mother, I do not know where we are exactly. Somewhere west of Moscow. The snow has started. Our great machines are frozen in place. The ground won't give, and neither will the Russians. We were told we'd be home by harvest. Now we just hope to make it through the week. I still carry Father's watch. It ticks like a heart that refuses to stop, even when everything else does. Tell Anna I still remember the sound of her laugh. Love, Hans. By November, we knew. We wouldn't reach Moscow. Not before winter. Not ever, maybe. What began as lightning had become mud, ice, fire, screams in languages I didn't understand. They told us this would be the final war, the great struggle of civilization. I think we were just grist for a machine that didn't care who it chewed up. The turning point wasn't a battle. It was the moment we stopped believing we'd win. November 15th, 1941. We were near Klin, northeast of Moscow. The ground was white, the sky steel gray, and our coats, our summer coats, were soaked through and frozen stiff. We thought it couldn't get worse. Then the temperature dropped to -20. Engines froze overnight. Rifles jammed. Men burned fence posts and books to stay warm. One morning we woke to find a sentry dead on his feet, frozen stiff, still clutching his rifle. The tanks stopped moving. By November 25th, our Panzer IIIs were stuck. Not in mud this time, but ice. Tracks cracked. Batteries died. Mechanics lit fires under the engines just to warm them enough to turn over. The Soviets didn't stop. They came in skis, camouflaged, silent, ghosts in white. We couldn't hear them until they opened fire. December 2nd. The official record says it was the closest we ever got to Moscow, 20 kilometers from the city limits. We could see the glow on the horizon, but we never reached it. The Soviets counterattacked. Reinforcements from Siberia, fresh, strong, prepared for winter. My unit lost half its men in a single night. I remember crawling into a shell crater next to a Russian corpse just to get out of the wind. December 5th. The Red Army launched its counteroffensive. They came with tanks wrapped in tree branches and infantry howling like wolves. We were pushed back, kilometer by kilometer. What we took in June, we lost in days. The men stopped talking. We just moved, or froze, or died. One corporal shot himself in the foot just to be sent home. Another wandered into the snow and never came back. December 15th, we found a burned-out village and set up what we called camp. 4 broken walls and a door that wouldn't close. Someone had a harmonica, played Stille Nacht. It made a few of us cry. Dietrich whispered that his son would be 4 this year. I tried to write home, but my hands were too numb to hold the pencil steady. December 24th, Christmas Eve. I don't remember the day, just the night. The snow had stopped. The sky was clear, stars everywhere. We passed a flask of schnapps someone had kept hidden since Minsk. I shared my last cigarette with Dietrich. We didn't speak. What was there to say? We were still alive. That was enough. January 2nd. Orders came down. We were retreating. Not a rout, they said. A strategic repositioning. But we knew the truth. We were broken. Some walked with frostbitten feet, toes blackened, wrapped in rags. Others limped, carried, pulled on sleds made from barn doors. I helped a boy named Richter, 17, shot in the hip, barely conscious. He died on the sled 3 days later. January 10th. I reached a field hospital. They called it a hospital, but it was a tent with blood-soaked sheets and nurses who hadn't slept in days. They cleaned my frostbitten fingers and wrapped them. I still have the scars. I lay beside men missing limbs, eyes, sanity. The moaning never stopped, like waves on a shore of pain. I stared at the canvas ceiling and wondered if I'd ever see home again. January 15th. The snow was still falling. The front had frozen, not just in temperature, but in spirit. We weren't the unstoppable army of June. We were tired, hollow. We stopped calling it victory. We just called it the war. I heard a rumor that the Fuhrer was furious, that we'd betrayed the fatherland by retreating. I wanted to tell him he should try standing in a Russian blizzard with a jammed rifle and no socks. That was the winter of 1941, the winter that taught us we were not invincible, just men, cold, scared, and trying to survive. February 10th. I was moved to a rear camp west of Smolensk. Not quite a hospital, not quite the front. A place for the broken to heal, or to be forgotten. The floorboards creaked with every step. The food was watery but hot. Some nights, I could almost sleep. I was there with a dozen others, frostbitten, wounded, hollow-eyed. We didn't talk about the front. We just stared out the frosted window like prisoners pretending we weren't. Rumors started again, a spring offensive, reinforcements, new equipment, but none of us believed it. Our rifles were rusted, our boots had holes, and they were already pulling veterans like me back to the front. February 25th, I was cleared for duty. The medic shook his head when he signed the paper. "You're lucky," he said. I didn't feel lucky. March 3rd. I was reassigned to the remnants of my old unit, holding a line near Vyazma. The trench was barely waist-high, dug in frozen ground, filled with slush and lice. The Russians were always close. We could hear them singing some mournful tune at night, like a funeral for the world. Dietrich was still alive, thinner, quieter. He looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was real. March 10th. The snow began to melt. At first, we welcomed it. Then we remembered the mud. Mud that sucked boots off your feet. Mud that clogged rifle barrels. Mud that made you pray for the cold to come back. We dug out a cart stuck in a bog for 6 hours. The horses collapsed from exhaustion. We shot them where they lay. I couldn't feel anything anymore. Not anger, not fear, just movement. April 3rd. Dear Mother, I received your last letter. I'm glad to hear the cows made it through winter. Please give Anna my love and tell her I haven't forgotten her laugh. You asked if I still believe in what we're fighting for. I think we're just trying to outlive it now. Love, Hans. April 15th. New recruits arrived. Boys, 17 maybe, still growing into their uniforms. They looked at us like we were legends. We looked at them like they were ghosts to be. One of them, Muller, asked me if we'd see Moscow soon. I told him no. He asked why. I didn't answer. May 5th. They shelled us for 2 hours straight. The sky turned black from smoke. Trees snapped. Trenches collapsed. Muller died next to me. Took a shard of shrapnel through the neck. He didn't even scream, just grabbed at the air like he was reaching for something that wasn't there. I held his hand until it went still. May 20th, a quiet day. No shells, no orders, just quiet. I didn't trust it. We boiled coffee with melted snow and ate from a can labeled 1938. Dietrich said maybe the war would end soon. I told him it already had. We just hadn't been told yet. We watched the clouds for signs of planes. We listened to the wind for whispers in Russian. June 5th, they pulled us back, said we'd done our part, that others would take the front now. I rode in the back of a truck with 10 other men. None of us spoke. We just watched the trees pass by like ghosts watching the world forget them. We weren't the same soldiers who had crossed the Bug River last June. We weren't soldiers at all, just survivors. June 22nd, 1942, 1 year since the invasion. We stood at attention for a moment of silence. I looked around. Half the men I started with were gone. The rest were shadows. The officers talked about new offensives, about the oil fields to the south, about the great push into the Caucasus. But I no longer saw lines on maps. I saw graves, endless graves stretching eastward as far as this cursed land went. June 28, 1942. The new offensive began. They called it Fall Blau, Case Blue. The goal was the Caucasus, oil, fuel for the Reich. We were told this would finish the Soviets once and for all. Moscow could wait. The war would be won in the south. We believed it, for a little while. We always wanted to believe. July 5th, the sun had become an enemy. It beat down like a hammer. The roads were dust. The rivers were sludge. We marched for days through Ukraine. Steppe as far as the eye could see. Villages abandoned or burned. Cows lying bloated in fields. The smell never left your clothes. Our trucks were overloaded. Horses collapsed in their harnesses. We buried one of them with a cross made from 2 rifle stocks. No one laughed anymore. July 20th. We reached the Don River. The Russians were waiting. They shelled us as we crossed. We lost a boat full of engineers to a direct hit. The river was red. We said it was rust, but we knew it wasn't. Still, we made it across. We were told Stalingrad was just a few hundred kilometers further, just a few hundred more reasons to die. August 1st. We took a small village without a fight. Women and children waited for us like ghosts. One woman offered us bread. I gave her a cigarette. She wept. I don't know if it was gratitude or rage. That night, I slept in a real bed for the first time in months. I dreamed of rain falling on the roof of my father's barn. August 10th. We were near Kalak. The wind began to change. You could smell it. The river, the factories, the city on the edge of the map, Stalingrad. We didn't talk about it, but we felt it. The sense that everything behind us was about to vanish, and everything ahead was going to eat us alive. August 20th. The Luftwaffe began bombing Stalingrad. I watched from a hilltop as fire consumed the city. Columns of black smoke rose like funeral pyres. They said we'd destroyed it, that we'd broken Soviet morale. But when we moved closer, we realized we hadn't broken anything. We'd simply invited the devil to come out and fight. September 1st. We entered the outskirts of Stalingrad. The buildings were rubble. The streets were choked with bodies and dust. There were no front lines, just corners, basements, stairwells, and the men who died inside them. Snipers were everywhere. They aimed for the mouth, so you'd die with your last breath stuck in your throat. One man was shot while shaving. He died with lather still on his chin. September 10th. 10 days in the city, and already it felt like 10 years. The Russians didn't retreat. They rose from rubble, fought from holes, screamed at us with hatred I didn't understand, and maybe deserved. Dietrich couldn't sleep. He kept flinching at shadows, said he heard music that wasn't there. I just felt numb, like I was watching my own hands reload, fire, kill, without knowing why. September 20th. Dear Anna, I don't know if you'll ever read this, or if I'll ever send it, but I need to write something human. They say we're winning, but every step forward costs another friend. The city is on fire, and somehow I still feel cold. Do you still walk the river behind your house? I hope it still smells like spring. Yours, Hans. September 30th. We held positions near the tractor factory. The Soviets threw waves at us. Men, tanks, even women in uniform. It never stopped. I killed a man with a shovel. I still see his eyes in my dreams. The new replacements? Kids from Bavaria, Saxony, Berlin? They all ask when we're going home. We stopped asking that months ago. October 14th. We attacked the tractor factory at dawn. They called it strategic. All I saw was steel twisted like paper, smoke so thick it choked your soul. We fought inside the factory floor. Conveyor belts piled with dead, walls covered in soot and blood. Every room was a fortress. They shot from under pipes, behind engine blocks, through holes I couldn't even see. We lost 30 men in 3 hours and gained 300 meters. October 22nd. I dreamed I was home again. My father sitting in the yard, sharpening a scythe. My mother humming. Then I woke up to a rat chewing on my bootlace. I hadn't washed in weeks. My skin cracked from cold, sweat, and filth. Dietrich had lice. He called them his only friends left. There were no warm meals, just hard biscuits, frozen grease, and whatever you could scavenge from corpses. November 19th. The sky turned red. We thought it was sunrise, but it was fire. The Soviets attacked from the north and south at once. Operation Uranus, their encirclement had begun. We were too far in, too thin. The Romanians on our flanks broke first. Then the Soviets poured in like water through a cracked dam. November 23rd. Encircled, trapped. Paulus told us we would hold the city, that air resupply would come. But there were no planes, just clouds, just snow. We dug deeper, into basements, sewers, any hole that kept the wind out. The city rotted above us, and we rotted inside it. December 5th. The rations ran out. We boiled leather from belts, ate bread made from sawdust and flour. A man named Kessler slid a frozen horse and ate raw meat from the ribs. He died the next day, smiling. I lost 15 kilos. My fingers shook, my vision blurred. We started whispering about cannibalism. Just whispers. For now. December 24th, Christmas Eve. We found a tin of jam and passed it around. Dietrich coughed blood. He said it tasted like raspberries. Then he died. We wrapped his body in blankets and left him in the corner. There was no time for graves anymore. January 10th. The Soviets began their final push, artillery like I'd never heard before. Endless, merciless. They didn't want us to break. They wanted us to know they could destroy us whenever they wished. Buildings fell in on themselves. Men hid beneath bodies for warmth. We didn't fight anymore. We endured. January 25th. Our last defense collapsed. Ammunition was gone. Command was silent. I watched a captain shoot himself with his last bullet. I still had mine. I didn't know what I was saving it for. January 31st. General Paulus surrendered. No more orders. No more lies. Just silence. The Soviets didn't celebrate. They just stared at us. Dirty, frozen, barely men. We surrendered not just the city, but who we were when we entered it. February 2nd. The Battle of Stalingrad was over. 300,000 men entered. Less than 90,000 walked out. Of those, only a handful would ever see home again. I was among them. But in truth, Hans Becker never left that city. Just his body, starving, silent, and unsure why he had survived. February 10th, 1943. They marched us east. We weren't prisoners. We were remnants, frostbitten, starving, carrying nothing but lice and memories. They didn't beat us. They didn't need to. The cold did that for them. March 5th. Camp number unknown. Barbed wire, wooden barracks, 2 thin blankets for 12 men. Soup of water and cabbage stems, bread like stone. Men died in their sleep. They'd be warm in the morning, we used to say, as a joke, or a prayer. Names stopped mattering. You were only your number, and the number only mattered when they needed more men for the burial detail. Summer came. We worked in fields, in forests, in rail yards. I dug 1,000 ditches that led nowhere. I don't know how many bodies I buried, both German and Russian. Sometimes the guards shared cigarettes, once a bowl of stew. And for 5 minutes, I remembered what kindness felt like. The war raged on, but we didn't know who was winning, only who was still alive each morning. New prisoners came in 1944, from Hungary, Romania, even our own Volkssturm, old men and boys. One boy, maybe 15, didn't last a week. I turned 30 in that camp, I didn't notice. May 8th, 1945. They told us the war was over. No victory parade, no tears, just silence. For many of us, the war wasn't over. It just changed names. We remained in the camps. The Soviets called it justice. I called it waiting. I spent another 10 years in captivity, 10 years watching calendars fall apart, 10 years dreaming of the color green, of bread with crust, of my sister's voice. Some men went mad. Others converted, became communists, translators, guards themselves. I just endured, not because I was strong, but because I couldn't imagine dying in a place with no name. October 15th, 1955. I stepped off the train in Germany. They gave us clean clothes, a warm meal, smiles, as if we hadn't aged a century since we left. No one knew what to say. I hugged my mother. She was smaller now, her hair white, her hands shaking like mine. I tried to live again, fixed machines, read books, planted tomatoes. I married once. It didn't last. I wasn't the man she needed. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Some nights, I hear Russian spoken in my dreams. Other nights, I wake to the sound of footsteps in snow. I'm not a hero. I'm not a victim either. I was just a soldier in a war that devoured everything. Borders, ideals, men. We marched into Russia in June 1941. I came home in October 1955. 14 years. For what? They say history is written by the victors, but memory belongs to the broken. This is what I remember. Not the maps, not the speeches, not the flags, but the faces of men beside me, the snow in my boots, the boy who died with a picture of his mother in his hand. My name is Hans Becker. I survived Barbarossa, but I never truly came back.